Ole Miss was literally a play away from being in the college football playoff in 2024. What does the projection look like for 2025? We're going to give you that and break down this 2025 schedule here in this video. Ole Miss has a pretty interesting schedule in 2025, especially in the non-conference. As you take a look at this full schedule, and here is that non-conference schedule. So they're going to play Georgia State, Tulane, Washington State, and the Citadel. So they do not have a Power 4 opponent on the schedule, but Tulane, one of the better group of 5 teams, Washington State in the Pac-2, whatever you want to call them, they actually had a pretty good season last year. So interesting non-conference schedule. Georgia State has had some decent years at the group of 5 level as well. And then, of course, the Citadel. So all games that Ole Miss, they'll be big favorites in all these games, but I think they'll give them just enough of a test to where these will be really good games for them. I think that teams should do this a little bit more. Maybe, yeah, you don't want to play a team or a bunch of teams that you might could lose to, but play some teams that, you're not going to beat 60-0. Play some teams you might beat by 3 or 4 touchdowns, something like that. So I did find that interesting with this schedule. We don't typically see, I don't know if we've ever really seen an SEC team play 2 good programs that were not Power 4 programs. So very interesting schedule there. I'm sure Washington State was scheduled back when they were in the Pac-12. But yeah, here's the home and away. You look at who they play. Of course, in the SEC, it's going to be flipped from last year. They'll play Arkansas, LSU, South Carolina, and Florida at home this year. And they'll play Kentucky, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Mississippi State on the road. I was just thinking about that Oklahoma game. I don't remember that game. Like I can remember pretty much every game from last season, at least, especially the SEC games. I don't really remember that game. So that's kind of weird, but they'll play on the road this time instead of at home. So let's get to that schedule. They'll start with Georgia State on August 30th. That'll be a home game. Then they play Kentucky. So interesting, they'll play Kentucky on the road September 6th. Early in the season again, week 2 actually, so very early in the season. In fact, Ole Miss plays 2 SEC teams in their first 3 games, which is also very unique. This is just like a unique schedule for Ole Miss. Throw in the fact that they also have a bye week the week before their final game. Like, it's just kind of a weird schedule. But Kentucky on the road, then Arkansas at home on September 13th. Then it's Tulane on September 20th and LSU on September 27th. So you look at those first 5 games, the first month of the season before their first bye week, and you're talking about, a Georgia State team that's not a horrible group of 5 team, and then 3 SEC games plus Tulane, who's a pretty good group of 5 team. That is that's a tough start to the season. And not saying Ole Miss can't win all these games, and they'll probably be favored in all 5 of these games, but it's still like you don't usually have 5 games without any like real cupcakes, or at least more than one. I mean, maybe you call Georgia State a cupcake, that's fine, but 4 of their first 5 games will be probably somewhat competitive games. So that is very interesting with this schedule. And then they get into these next 5 games, actually 6 games before their other bye week. They'll have Washington State on October 11th. Then it's back-to-back road games at Georgia and at Oklahoma. Then home for South Carolina. Then it's the Citadel, and it's a really weird spot. The first, on November 8th, actually, the second weekend of November. And then Florida at home on November 15th. So this is definitely a strange schedule, having a random FCS opponent. Usually the FCS opponents come in the first few weeks, or they come like in the next to the last week. We see that a lot in the SEC, but not just randomly, with 3 games to play after that. I do look at this stretch, though, from Georgia to South Carolina. That's a brutal stretch. 2 road games, one of them against Georgia, one of them against Oklahoma, and a South Carolina team that a lot of people are high on coming into the season. So that's definitely the stretch right there. That's the toughest stretch of the season, without a doubt. And again, you got Washington State after weird bye weeks. Not where you want to see these bye weeks. You get a bye week before playing Washington State. Then you get your other one before the Egg Bowl. I know that's a big rivalry game and all that, but these are definitely not the toughest opponents on this schedule. I'd rather see a bye week before Georgia, or maybe between Georgia and Oklahoma, so you don't have back-to-back weeks with road games. You'd rather have that bye week late in the year before Florida, I think, instead of Mississippi State. So this is just a very strange, a very unique schedule for Ole Miss as I look at it. Again, I preview all these schedules. We break down all these schedules, and I haven't really seen one that comes out like this. I just find it unique. I'd love to get your thoughts on this one. But if you see how they stack up in the SEC, so you look at their opponents from last year, the winning percentage from 2024 for their 2025 opponents, which would be the same opponents, for Ole Miss, it's 26-38, so a 41% winning percentage. That actually gives them one of the easiest schedules in conference play. But I think you look at teams that are going to be better. Like Florida's going to be better. Oklahoma's going to be better more than likely. Kentucky and Arkansas, maybe they're a little bit better. So I think this schedule is tougher than that number would indicate. Also, you have the fact that they played Mississippi State. They had no wins. So that's, if you just take Mississippi State out of this, and then that record's 26-30. So that's obviously much, much different. But still, it is, it's not the toughest schedule. I just look at the way the games are set up, like when they fall. It is a little bit tricky, and we'll see what happens for Ole Miss. But overall, I think it's a fairly tough schedule for them, despite the fact that the SEC, their SEC opponents maybe aren't at the top. Like you do have Georgia, but you don't have to play Texas. You don't have to play Alabama. You don't have to play some of those top teams. But still, I do think this Ole Miss schedule is going to be a little bit tricky for them in 2025. Before we get to the 2025 projected record, just want to let everyone know we do have an Ole Miss channel. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, go check it out. Weekly show, videos throughout the week. Again, Ole Miss fans, go subscribe to our Ole Miss channel. The Ole Miss Rebels have kind of established themselves as one of the top programs in the SEC when you look at their records the last few years. What's this projection going to look like in 2025? Well, let's first look back at some of those projections from the past 4 seasons, and you can see in 2021, projection was 8-4. They went 10-2. They beat it by 2 games. In 2022, projection, again, with our formula, 8-4. They went 8-4. 2023, they really surprised, or at least they did a lot better than the projection. Projection had them at 7-5. They went 10-2. And then last season, the projection was 9-3. They went 9-3. So 2 out of the last 4 years, this projection has been exactly right. The other 2 years, they were better than the projection. And again, reminder, this is not a prediction. I don't do predictions until after Memorial Day. We don't even know what these final rosters are going to look like. It's just a projection based off of the opponents they play, and then how tough the schedule is and how good those opponents are expected to be. Simple as that. So here's the schedule again, and this is the scale that we use. And so Ole Miss is a Tier 2 team. In our tier rankings, which is what this is all based off of, they are a Tier 2 team. That means if they play another Tier 2 team, it's going to be a 50-50 game. If they play a team that's below them in Tier 3, it's going to be a 61-70% game. But if that's on the road, it drops to a 50-50 game in that 40-60 range. So that's kind of the way it works. And I do like to say that you can look at this with the point spread. If it's in the 50-50 range, the point spread probably going to be 3, 4, 5 points. If it's in the purple, probably about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, 71-80. And then you're talking about double-digit spreads, and then over 80, probably like a 20-plus point spread. But that's not what this is based off of. We're not trying to guess spreads. That's just one way to look at it, and I like to mention that. So you start with those easy wins. I'm going to actually give them 5. And I know you look at Tulane, you look at Washington State, you look at Mississippi State. Again, with our tier system and the way we do this, those do come out in the green. If I'm just looking at those games, I would probably put them, I don't know. They would be, to me, they're like borderline, whether they should be in the blue or the green. So, yeah, counting those as wins, I don't know if I would do that, especially Egg Bowl on the road. And in Tulane's a pretty good group of 5 team. But, I don't know how good Tulane and Washington State are really going to be. Again, with our formula, these games all do come out in the green, which means when we do the calculation at the end, these will all be counted as wins. So 5 wins for Ole Miss that you can pretty much count on. But I circle back to that Egg Bowl on the road. I don't know if I'd count that a guaranteed win just because of the rivalry. But based off of where Mississippi State fell in our tier rankings, again, that is why that is in the green. So keep that in mind. 5 games that they should win. And then you got a couple of games where they should probably win. I mean, they're going to be probably double-digit favorites in these games. I know they lost to Kentucky last year, and it is on the road. So again, there's no human element to this. If I'm assigning predictions here, honestly, I probably put that game in the purple, and I probably put the Mississippi State game in the blue. So I think this projection is maybe overrating Ole Miss a little bit, or not overrating them, but let's say underrating their opponents. Let's put it that way, because again, they are in tier 2 with this formula. But that Kentucky game could be a little bit tricky. I'd probably put it in the purple. Arkansas, there's been a lot of close games there. I might even put that one in the purple. So again, like I said, I think just with our tier rankings and where these teams fall, that doesn't always give the full story because it doesn't account for rivalry games and things like that. But with our formula, again, those games are in the blue. And then we go to the games in the purple. Actually, no, we don't have any in the purple. We have one in the yellow. So Georgia on the road. Now, Georgia is in tier 1, and that game is on the road. So that's why that one's in the yellow. If they had Georgia at home, it would be a 50-50 game because, like I said, Ole Miss is a tier 2 team. So that one's going to be tough. I know Ole Miss, they did what they did last year, but that does not play into this. It's simply based off of these tier rankings. So that one is in the yellow. Again, a 30 to 39% chance, somewhere in that range. I do think Ole Miss is probably an 8 or 9 point underdog in that game. And that leaves us with LSU, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Florida. So you've got LSU, another tier 2 team, South Carolina, another tier 2 team, and same thing with Florida. So 3 teams that are in the same tier. Good news for Ole Miss is you've got all of those games at home. So if you can take care of business at home and win those games, that's probably going to be what gets Ole Miss in the college football playoff. I'll just go ahead and say it right now. If Ole Miss makes the college football playoff, they are going to need to beat LSU, South Carolina, and Florida, or at least go 2-1 in those games. Those are going to be huge games. And then you've got Oklahoma. That's a tier 3 team, but it's on the road. Also, it's right after playing Georgia and right before playing South Carolina. So that's going to be a tough one. I wouldn't count that as a win. So yeah, it does come in the 50-50 range again. It's a tier below Ole Miss, yes, but it's on the road. That's why that's there. So you've got 4 games that could really go either way. You're going to be a slight underdog against Georgia, and then should be a pretty good favorite against Kentucky and Arkansas, and 5 games that Ole Miss should win. So what projection do we get for the Rebels? Well, when you average everything out, you get a 9-3 projection. So like I said, I think this is underrating the opponents a little bit. I have no problems with a 9-3 projection, but just based off of how this turns out for most teams, because it's a very conservative approach, and the fact that you've got 4 toss-up games, and then you've got a Georgia game where you're going to be an underdog, and then maybe they slip up somewhere else, I could even see 8-4 being the projection. Now, I think they could do better than even 9-3. I think they could do 10-2, and maybe that's what I'll predict. But just, again, based off of how we do this with all these teams, I think this formula does come out pretty well for Ole Miss because of some of these opponents. So we're talking about Kentucky, Arkansas, and Mississippi State, maybe even Tulane. Again, games they should win, but for other teams that maybe are in similar situations, if the tiers are just a little bit different, the formula is going to give them a loss in one of those games, but for Ole Miss, going to give them wins in those games. So 9-3 is the projection for Ole Miss, right back where they were last year. Probably not going to get them in the college football playoff, but still, this would be a very solid season for the Rebels. Give us your thoughts on this Ole Miss team. What do you think the projection should be? How do you think they're going to do in 2025? Let me know down in the comments below. And just a reminder, memberships are now available right here on the channel. You can get early access to videos like this. You can get priority reply to comments, emojis, badges, exclusive posts, some other things as well. So if you if you'd like to help support the channel, help us grow here, please become a member today.